may well think you know who he is. 10 minutes after he gets served his divorce papers, he becomes somebody else. And that is particularly true with respect to his attitudes and his bearing to his employer. The person who was once supplying the dreams for this, supplying money to support his dreams of him and his wife now is another basically thorn around his neck because he wants to go out and buy the Corvette and go someplace else and get a bond. And so his attitude towards the company and towards the responsibilities he's being given that company changes radically. And I was aware of that because some personal situations of people I knew. I was a child of the 60s, so all my friends were children of the 60s, and they were basically, once you turn 50 or whatever, people, another change point in some people's lives. But they tend, everything that you've ever done wrong in your life catches up with you, and you tend to become bitter, you get trouble or whatever. But some things happen to people that they either want revenge, or they go and they make their master stroke, right? I mean, that's another bifurcating thing. So I knew this about people, just from, again, personal experience. So I said, what can I do to sit there and determine when a person is making that change? And there was also something else. I was very heavily embedded with the Asian community in Houston. I happened to have somebody that I knew that had been a victim of some things, stepped in and became involved with the Asian community there in Houston, and was in a very diverse environment throughout my career as a contractor coming in a very diverse situation. And was aware that in certain cultures, and particularly in Asian cultures, people with very bright ideas except don't speak up at meetings. They tend not to be, other than when they're a colloquial group, and I think two predominant groups, and that would be East Indians and the Chinese in particular, tend to be well educated, tend to be, if not, there's two different levels, but in terms of our business, there's road education and there's innovation, and the innovation sometimes gets too much. There's a lot of value in people, but anyway, a lot of value comes from that part of the world, and a lot of because you have communal things like emphasis and things like that have aggregate their knowledge bases into common areas. These people exchange knowledge. Well, that doesn't get propagated if you have a situation where you're in a conversation like this, and a lot of boardrooms didn't in the 2000s. Where you would have people with all this knowledge, but they were afraid because they were not their personality types and their culture. They didn't encourage going out there, especially against management, against authority figures. They would not voice particularly a contrary opinion. So there are two things I was aware of. Number one, people aren't what they say they are. Another thing is they may not be getting the most advantage of it. So what can I do looking around, being in all these environments? What do I see? I see screens. Everywhere I go, I saw computer screens. Of course, in my world, because I'm sitting there. So I said, I don't want to be in the business of analyzing, monitoring people, looking at their applications and all this crap. So the hell with that. What is the bottom line, most thing common about those screens? They have pixels. Right? Everyone has pixels. And they have a keyboard, so I can tell the pixels on the screen which of those pixels are responsibility of the user, who put them because of what's typed on the keyboard, who typed on the mouse, and who got there because it came to. So I could just segregate what the person did, and equally important, what they were happy and comfortable seeing. If you're getting porn sites and stuff like that, you're comfortable seeing that actually says something about you. Now, you may not have asked for those. They may have come through your email or a bad click or something like that. But if you leave them up there for a certain period of time, it says that that's acceptable to you. Now, irrespective of anybody's moral judgment, but there's a weighting that applies to each of these behaviors. There's a greater weighting that applies to when you've entered something and it's pornographic, or it's offensive, or it has curse words, or it has. So somebody else, a lady by the name of Whistler from St. Martin University of Canada, had started a project where she had gone through the American lexicon and identified, I think, 3,800 in the original past words and their emotional content. She interviewed people and said, what's your reaction to this word, both in neutral settings and in context with other words and stuff like that. Did a great deal of research for this. So was able to come up with what was very rudimentary at the time, but set of things that could tell you anger, could tell you certain emotional content, mood, from the context of the words people be using. Now, the value systems themselves are worthless, right? The numbers you would assign to somebody's anger state, it's a number, right? You're 38.0 right now. You're 17.3. It means nothing. If you become 17.5 and compare it to the 17.3, it does mean something. Yeah. If you become 40.0, that means something. That's the deal. You go out and you screen scrape text. You determine what the source of that text, you put it in text and you put it in time. You apply much more sophisticated than what she had, and that stuff has evolved. One of the things that's helped us here is advertising. There's a tremendous amount of value to people for extracting in very momentary context what a person's mood, what they're thinking in terms of the money thing. And whenever in this culture, whenever there's money involved, there's research involved, there's data involved, and stuff like that. So there's a lot of progress being made in that area. But it's not being applied, it's very specific oriented, right? It's for the purpose of selling something. So my attitude was the other. What if you looked at the person and tracked this person across all of their samples of the work they did, differentiated from the main body of the work, obviously they're paralegal, you take the terminology stuff that be common to that, and you separate it out, we'll take the deltas, and then compare that, and track that, and if you've got enough samples, what would it look like? Well, it's pretty telling. It is amazing. I tell people this, and I don't want to offend my wife here, but it got to the point, and I need to tell you something, and I really would prefer this not leave this room, but I think it's sort of known. One of the things, I've always had my professional career, in which I was fairly adept. People were willing to pay me and rehire me and stuff, so I must have been pretty good at it. But I've always had the second thing that I've done as well, which is this extension of my career through doing, because look what I do on coding. So what I did is I was in these very large corporations, and I could test my stuff. I was a hacker. So putting things on people's machines to see if they work wasn't a challenge for me. Had I gotten caught, it might have been the end of my career. But I don't get caught. But and that's sort of the secret sauce here. I don't pretend that I'm smarter or anything, but I have resources I didn't have, and I was willing to take risks. I didn't want to be poor. So that's the risk I took. I was able to insinuate these on a variety of different machines and track them over Ethernet backbone networks. I didn't have to go out over the network. So I could sit there and tap off, pull information rather than have to send to me, which they could detect. Right. I said pull from outside because I had trust relationships already with this. So that's what I did, and then I already could tell a woman's menstrual cycle from taking these. I mean, that's how finite it can be. Now, there's some caveats to it. Right? You can only be so much into it, and that's all bound into this technology. We understand that for different situations, different people, I could tell because I knew the person, for example. I could tell that these certain readings I would get, I knew for one thing she was female. I could have extrapolated that. I would know this person. I would be, so I would have targeted them by putting this on the machine because I knew something about them. Because I need something I could track and control, so I can track my data, see, well, how's this tracking reality? I happen to know she was going through a divorce, so okay, I see the spike, and I can associate it, right? Now, without that a priori knowledge and stuff like, there's some challenges as well. So I don't want to. So a lot of this is a certain amount of what I would call primitive AI. Okay, so what we do is we take data, we look at what we've seen before. We have relatively standardized or stable sample environment personnel. And that's where some of the things that attracted me to when we had our conversation, I really enjoyed that, is that I had kind of gotten away, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but I had to get away from product because just to consume too much resources. But one of the problems you have in modern corporations and stuff like that is with the rise of mobility, with the rise of thing, it's very difficult, much more difficult to go out against the internet, for example, and try to scrape stuff. Now there's one environment, to which it actually winds up being rather ideal. Twitter, of all things. Twitter is small, was 140, not 280 characters, which is ideal for our situation, sample sizes. They tell you which is being resent as opposed to what's being emitted by the person. They tell you a time date, they tell you a timestamp, and you can also track reactions, right? It happens to be serialized, it happens to be ideal. Now you can't always tell, obviously, if the person claiming to do, there's all that crap. But one thing that came, so in that one scenario, it actually has some use, and thank God for the president we've got, that it made Twitter more popular, because they were actually going down the tubes before this still are, I think. In any case, so there are some places where it's applicable, but it's not that they can't be done as far as more general, it's just more difficult. But in a captive situation, military, corporate Ethernet backbone environment, where you have, particularly we have what we call CRAP environments, container related asset protection, where people are migrating, are depending for all their security on these centralized servers. Well, that gating, that going through these choke points and stuff is great for us because it gives us a control point so we get some of that stability that we need, make sure that the individuals are tracking. But it's much more effective if you have a given set of individuals you've already pre-identified whose behavior you're interested in, as opposed to going out there and randomly sampling people. And so and we'll try to get kind of skipping around here more. We'll get into the predictive stuff more, but I wanted to explain kind of the evolution of thought process that goes through then, how certain things fell into play and stuff. So in this time frame, I'm coming out of these very large organizations. I happen to have this access, especially in NASA, but to access to people, places, and things. I can not test some things. I can do some experimenting, and I can do it in off hours because the nature of my responsibilities of my primary job was such that they were willing to have me invest the work necessary to some people off hours and do some things like that. So,
what you have tentatively developed is a highly sought after capability of the Department of Defense.
And that I depend on you for because
really looking for it. Especially, I was really interested in what you said on Twitter because one of the areas that they're having trouble with is social media. Right? Like we don't know how to track social media. We don't know how to look if somebody's posted on social media like Twitter.
Twitter and Facebook timelines is another, just because the problem is timeliness. Other abstract things you put out there, I know what you're saying, I do that all the time. I'm trying to stop myself from doing it. So.
Go for it. No, just keep talking. I was going to say
the thing we have with general posts on the internet is that we can't always tell what's been reposted from someplace else. We can't tell what comes from, say, fake news or canned sites or whatever. But the beauty of things like Facebook's timeline, Twitter, those things that are timestamped, that we can be reasonably sure of the source, that have context. Boy, that's our bread and butter, right? I mean,
for sure.
Yeah, because we can go back and we can backfit. Even if we find something, discover something in 2008 that was actually germane to 2004, we can go insinuate it back in the time to do a recap.